It began with a scream that never found its way out. The poison was silent, but its truth was louder than any confession. Ted's body hit the floor before Leslie and Carlton could even breathe, the shattered glass beneath him reflecting the moment everything they'd built began to rot. What should have been a toast turned into a funeral for trust itself. His final stare burned through them like a warning from the grave, a promise that his death was only the beginning. Somewhere between the spilled wine and the blood that followed, a secret far more lethal than the poison itself began to stir. And when it rises, no one standing in that room will be left unscarred. The room sagged under a pallid evening light where the smell of liquor fused with the metallic edge of blood, heavy as a verdict. Ted collapsed, eyes reddened, tremors raking his body as poison tore through his veins. His hand clawed for the edge of the table only to drag the last glass to the floor, shards spreading a dark stain, the remnant of trust undone. It happened so quickly that time seemed to halt. In his final gaze there was no plea for mercy, only an inferno of rage, a soul burning itself to cinders, and when his heart stopped, his eyes remained open, cold and fixed like a curse unspent. Leslie froze, fingers shaking, unsure whether from fear or guilt. She had never imagined it would end like this, yet somewhere deep inside she knew it was no accident. The late-night calls, the chill in Carlton's stare, the soft assurances that silence was necessary, all of it assembled into a horror she could no longer deny. Carlton did not cry out or lunge to help. He stared at Ted as if at an apparition, face set, eyes heavy, and behind that weighed an uncanny calm, the calm of a man who had chosen to sever the past. Ted was no innocent. He was a man who knew too much, a keeper of keys to secrets Carlton and Leslie had buried together. He had stood witness to a criminal transfer where power and survival were separated by a single signature. He had once sworn loyalty, but loyalty shrivels when cornered by truth. From the outside, his death could pass for misfortune, a heart spasm, a bad reaction. For Leslie, the moment the toxin overtook his bloodstream, she understood Carlton had decided to cut the fuse to everything they had been. Carlton stepped closer, looking down on the body without visible grief. What remained in him was exhaustion, the kind forged by years of wearing masks. He had imagined himself master of the board, the hand on every string. The body proved otherwise. In this game everyone was a piece. Ted was gone, but the malediction in his stare lingered. It wedged itself into Carlton's nights like a blade, lodging deeper with each hour he failed to sleep. Leslie could not endure the silence. She wanted to scream questions into the air, but questions meant nothing now. There was no love left, only the alliance of guilt. Together they had concealed, together they had lied, and together they now stood over a man dead from what they had set in motion. Carlton's eyes on her contained no accusation, only emptiness, as if she too were a component of a plan already executed to completion. Plans, however, always exact a price. From the day Ted died, their world began to warp. Shareholders asked pointed questions, the press hovered, old friends drifted. An anonymous source sent Leslie a blurred photo from the scene, the angle hazy yet clear enough to show the glass and Carlton's hand near it. Coincidence was no longer plausible. Someone was watching. Someone knew. Carlton tried to steady her, but he felt the shift as well. Ted's hard drives had been wiped, finance folders scrubbed, and an off-ledger account he once opened suddenly wired a large sum to an unnamed recipient. Part of Carlton believed Ted had prepared for this end, that he had foreseen betrayal and left snares behind. The nightmare thickened. Leslie was called to an internal hearing. Several employees claimed they had seen her arguing with Ted the night before he died. A leaked memo insinuated the death was not natural. Carlton sought to contain the damage, but rumor moved faster than strategy. The erosion of control made him dangerous, not to others at first, but to himself. His temper became a storm without warning. He shattered glasses, tore papers, threw whatever his hands found. Leslie watched the change in silence. She knew he was falling, and she knew she could not save him. In his eyes she was the embodiment of their sin, the shard preventing him from pretending they had done nothing. One morning a letter arrived without a name. Only one line, "The eyes of the dead still look at you." Leslie read it again and again, chilled not by the words but by the handwriting, so nearly identical to Ted's it cut her breath. Fear hardened into obsession. She heard sounds at night, a footstep too soft, a laugh behind her shoulder as she crossed the hallway. She told herself it was guilt, yet a smaller, darker part believed Ted's spirit had not departed. Suspicion turned inward. Was Carlton erasing traces, or was he trying to drive her mad so that she would become easy to control, then discard? Carlton found no rest either. Unmarked calls arrived after midnight, no words, only breathing. Once he received a hallway camera clip, a grainy silhouette passing the office lens, the tilt of a head unmistakably Ted's. He startled, then anger eclipsed dread. Someone was playing a psychological war, softening him before the real blow. The tension between them tightened like wire. Carlton began to suspect Leslie of sending the images, building a net to cast blame on him. Leslie believed the opposite, that Carlton was engineering panic to break her nerve so he could present himself as the lone victim of a double betrayal. They slept beneath one roof like enemies posted at opposite watchtowers. Every glance was a question, every movement a feint. Then the police arrived. A new witness had surfaced, a former colleague of Ted's, claiming he had seen Carlton with a vial of toxin on the night in question. Carlton denied it, but the board tilted. He sensed Leslie's panic and, instead of calming it, turned the vice. Selective leaks painted her as the one who prepared Ted's drink. Survival replaced partnership. Leslie hired counsel, yet doors closed like shutters in a storm. People she had aided in the past went quiet or vanished. Carlton was squeezing the air out of her life. He did not anticipate the card she still held, an old recording of Ted and Carlton in which Carlton uttered a threat he could never now explain away. Leslie kept it like a talisman and a blade. On the edge of sending it to the police, she received a message: "If you release it, Eva dies." Eva, the daughter they had kept away from public sight, the one untouched by their crimes. A photo followed, Eva at school, shot from too close. Someone was shadowing her. Leslie froze. She had been driven into a corner. The game had outgrown both her and Carlton. A third hand was steering. Carlton received the same threat and laughed without humor. He told himself it was the sentence he deserved. If Eva was harmed, he would no longer intervene. He would let the world burn down with him so no one could christen him a loser. That night Leslie disappeared. Police found her phone by the bridge over the lake, the screen still open to the recording of Ted and Carlton. Something else, too, a third voice, low, cold, unfamiliar, cut in at the end. "We are not finished." Carlton replayed it dozens of times, heart skidding each time. The voice felt known in a way he refused to admit. Deep inside he understood, it was Ted. Not the echo of a ghost, but the cadence of a man very much alive, a man who had orchestrated everything from the glass to the wiped drives to the counterfeit death itself. If that was true, then every move Carlton had made was just a step inside another's design. He scanned the empty house with the eyes of someone who had finally run out of corners. If Ted still lived, the last question was not who killed whom but who started first. In the days that followed, the fabric of their lives frayed past repair. Share prices staggered, alliances inverted, and narratives multiplied in the dark. Anonymous posts dredged up old contracts, shells of companies tied to both Carlton and Ted, foundations built to launder favors, trusts that traded silence for survival. Each revelation was a pebble that started a slide. Carlton worked like a man repairing a dam with his hands, yet water found every seam. He began to see how cleanly the trap had been welded, the camera angles that favored one interpretation, the timing of the leaks calibrated to the board's meetings, the poisonous geometry that pushed him and Leslie apart until no united defense remained. Regret corroded his anger, but anger kept him upright. He clung to a single purpose that felt like penance and prophecy, to find Eva before the machine used her to complete its sentence. Leslie's absence grew from a clue into a chasm. Was she dead by the lake, or had she staged an exit to lure the hunter into daylight? The bridge yielded no certainty, only a smear of footprints and a scent of fear that wind could not erase. In the silence, Ted's curse resumed its work. It threaded every hallway, pressed against the windows, sat down in Carlton's chair like a new master. He stood before his reflection and saw two men sharing one face, the protector who had failed and the architect of retribution he was becoming. He understood, perhaps too late, that the world he had built to keep danger at bay was the very engine that fed it. The ledger refused to balance. Love had been the collateral, guilt the currency, and now the interest had come due. Somewhere unseen the third voice counted the seconds. Somewhere a camera watched a schoolyard. Somewhere a phone awaited its moment to ring. Truth had promised liberation and delivered fire. Trust had promised shelter and delivered knives. The house held its breath as if time itself feared to move. If Ted's heart still beat, then death had not been an ending but an opening act, and the war that followed would demand a cost none of them could afford to pay. In the aftermath, silence devoured everything, the house, the night, the very air that had once carried their lies. The poison had done its work, but the real toxin was the truth still breathing among them. Carlton stood amid the ruins of his own control, haunted by the echo of Ted's final gaze, that unblinking curse that seemed to follow him even in daylight. Leslie wandered through the same rooms, her reflection fragmented across every mirror, wondering when guilt had become her only companion. Somewhere in the shadows, the unseen architect of this tragedy waited, feeding on their fear. Perhaps Ted was gone, or perhaps he had never really died at all. What remained was the unbearable certainty that every secret they buried was crawling its way back to the surface, hungrier than before, ready to finish what the poison began.